this little tool that's on here, which is referred to as an ISTAR diagram, right? So basically what happens with this is, I'm going to ask you, what's the incentive in you actually completing this? Because it's easy to walk out with a couple of sheets of paper and say, well, that was useful or whatever else, and not do anything with it. And then I'm going to go work my way around this. So we'll see how that kind of works. So in the first instance then, what's the incentive for you to actually do this? What's in it for you?
I think it will help, if it helps clarify my thoughts, then that's useful.
Right, okay. And is there something that comes after you thought clarification on this? Does that help you make the decision? Or?
I think it probably gives you more, helps you put an action plan together perhaps.
Right, okay, so there's a definite incentive there for you to actually do it, right. In terms of the sponsor, right, which means that when, you know, the big order comes in at work and you think, oh, well, this is secondary, I'll just park that for a moment, and we know that we don't usually go back to them until we have to or whatever else, who would be the person that you could turn to that would say, you know, how are you getting on with that, Rosemary? Are you where you wanted to be with it at the moment, or, you know, and just kind of get you back up in the saddle, as it were, so if you could...
There's nobody that I'd have to just make the decision myself.
Right, okay. So, do we need to find a sponsor? Sponsor is a very formal word, but...
You mean a mentor or a sponsor?
No, it's literally just a sponsor. It's somebody that basically, when something goes wrong with it, is you can either just sort of bounce the idea back off them again, or if you've stalled, then they're the person that kind of helps kind of like get you started again with it.
You mean a family or a friend or a...
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could talk to my father or something, yeah.
Right, okay. So ideally what you would do then is you'd let them know what your plan is,
yeah,
and then what they would do is just check in with you on certain dates. That's all they would do.
right.
And obviously if you were on target with it, then that's fine, and
Yeah.
give you the encouragement you need. If you were not on target with it, then give you the support to get back with it. So that's what the role of a sponsor does for this.
Okay,
All right? So sponsor is a very formal word for it, as I say, but it's kind of like that kind of thing.
okay.
Right, now what are the timescales for getting it done? Because you inadvertently let it slip. This is why I'm picking up on it earlier on. That you haven't got a timescale for this at all. So what are your timescales for getting this done?
I think I need to probably make a decision by the beginning of next year.
Okay.
Definitely, well, probably by the end of this year. Yeah.
So that's the whole thing's got to be done and dusted decision-wise by December 31st, 2012.
Yeah, I think I should be in a position by the beginning of next year to make a decision. Yeah.
Right, okay. The idea here, I suppose, in terms of the milestones, is to look at what they would be in an ideal world. But as you quite rightly say, there's an appreciation that the job opportunity to come in and could throw it all out the window. And that's a fair comment. And if that happens, then the only thing that's lost is the conversation. You see what I mean? Because by and large you can adapt any kind of plan that you're sort of working with, you know, to sort of cut it through. And if the job opportunity comes in, you just need to be in a position at that point to say, well, yes, I'll take it based upon my research that I've done, of which this is going to be some of it.
Yes, exactly.
So we might either have to accelerate the process or just let it run its natural course, depending on how it works. So 31st of December 2012 is when you'd have all of this done to actually make your decision.
Yeah.
And what, without putting dates on it, but what are the key milestones that you would need to do? So one of them is this kind of, as you said, the hard and fast stuff. Another one would be the emotional element, wouldn't it, that you said that you...
Yes, I think the key thing is that I've been out of the Asian market full time for quite some time, and so I need to get back in there relatively quickly if I'm going to build on or get back into the contacts that I have. The longer I'm away, the colder those contacts become. So there is a sense of urgency here, and as the situation obviously in Europe and the UK declines, it only becomes even more important, I think, to be looking elsewhere.
So would that deadline of the 31st of December still apply then? Or are you saying that you wanted to actually have it?
No, I mean, I just think it's important to have something
to
work for, because I think you can always delay it, can't you?
Yeah, you can. So this first part of the process then, if we started from, obviously here we are, sort of mid-March as it were, 31st of December.
Mid-May.
Sorry, mid-May. Mid-March,
I wish it was mid-March.
I know, it'd be great, wouldn't it? 31st of December, so what are the kind of steps that would actually get you to, by the 31st of December, say, okay, I know what I'm going to do?
I'm thinking having discussions with potential employers, having discussions with my client base in Asia. Those are the things that are going to help
Okay, so discussions
move
with
this forward.
employers, discussions with client base. Is there anything, I'm just wondering if there's anything that we know of within the kind of financial aspects that might change something. There's nothing changing in the tax regulations. You know what I mean, that we'd need, that would help us to actually make the decision by then that we know of. I can't think of anything, but...
No. I mean, the tax environment is obviously much better in Asia than it is here.
Yeah. But there's nothing that's due to change out there on 1st of August, for example, or that you know of?
No.
Right, okay. There's nothing else, like in terms of national political side of things, that might alter your decision?
No.
Okay, so there's no elections due in any areas, or...
They've had their election now.
Okay, so they're all covered with those kind of things. So it really boils down to discussions with the employers and discussions with your client base.
Yeah.
And going through this kind of location matrix, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably your 3 location matrix I put here. That's probably going to be your 3 milestones. So if you can get that done by certain dates, actually that seems quite manageable now when you think about it from that point of view. By the 31st of December you could have these 3 milestones done.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've actually done this the other way around, because the A in ISTAR is activities, the T being the timescales, so which we know is end result is the 31st of December. But the activities are discussions with employers, discussions with client base, and the locations matrix.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of the end user, the recipient of all of this, who's the main benefactor?
Moi.
Right. Secondary benefactor?
Nobody.
There is no secondary benefactor, so this is, you purely are the sole recipient of this. Right, okay, that's fine. I flag this up because on a much lesser scale, but I've lost count of the number of reports that I've read that have been written for the author rather than the reader.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been in the same position, most people in business have.
Yeah.
So it's always best to flag up, who the main benefactor is here. But in the case of you, that's great. It's a nice selfish model from that point of view. That's fine. That's fine. What the last step of this then really is just to say, well, what I'd like you to do is flesh out this a little bit more with so fill in these ones here, and then to sort of map this out. So what does it look like? A bit of a project plan, if you like, between now and 31st of December. The question is, when would you be able to put that project plan together?
Well, in theory, within the next week.
I can appreciate that. What about in practice? Because I want you to email it to me.
Right. Probably could do it by the end of next week.
By the end of next week? Okay. So if I'll give you a business card in a moment, but
again, there's some information that I would need to get, like housing costs.
exactly, yeah. So it'll be a few phone calls.
But it would just make it a couple of weeks, just in case I can't get in touch with people.
So if we said sort of end of May?
Yeah.
That'd be okay?
Yes.
Right, okay. So by the end of May, Peter, that's grand. And if there are other things, once you get to that stage, you say, actually it was quite useful or whatever else, I'd quite like to, take the next step.
Yeah.
We can do that. We'll probably do it over the phone if that's okay with
Sure.
yourself.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yes.
I'll give you that. Right. That's just the kind of discussions about the employees, discussion of client base, and the location. So that's the activities that run through it. And then what your commitment is to actually have it done by the end of May.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else, Rosemary, that you need at this point in time from me?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Brilliant.
What if I change these? I might, after some reflection,
by all means,
change them around a bit.
Yeah, I mean, play around with the process to make it your own in terms of that. So, as you say, after a bit of reflection, you might say, actually, I want this in there, not that.
Yeah, I might want to change things around a bit.
Yeah, but the trick is to actually identify what a perfect 10 is.
Yeah.
And then that's your standard, and then basically you can calibrate the rest of them against that perfect 10.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Rosemary, what we're looking at this time on our coaching session, you'd asked me to consider some methods of feedback. So what I've got is a couple of models that I actually want to go through with you, and then we'll see how that actually fits into what you do in your line of work. Okay? Now, from experience, feedback is always given in organisations when something goes wrong. Right? And lots of organisations say, well, we give feedback when good things happen as well. That's true, that does happen, but it always happens when something goes wrong. And by and large, when something goes wrong, you've got two issues. One is that what went wrong you need to put right, and then the second issue is that you need to learn from the mistake so that it doesn't happen again. Now, it's actually, from a neuroscience point of view, there's two different parts of the brain that deal with learning from the mistake and correction in terms of the problem solving. Right? Problem solving is the neocortex. Limbic system deals with the memory, learning, those kind of things. There is some connection, obviously, but what these two models do is they work with the different components. So this first one, which is called AID, and it's about what actually happened, what your intentions were, and what do you need to do to correct it. Obviously, it's about sorting the problem out. This second one that we've got here, which is NIP, an acronym for what's negative, what's interesting, and what's positive, is about learning from the mistake. Right? So what I'll do is I'll just explain this first one, AID, with you, right? And then you can ask, if you like, if you've got any questions as we go through, fire them in. So this first one then, AID, when something's gone wrong, this is very straightforward, it's action orientated. What you would do is you'd ask the individual what actually happened, not what you think happened, not your opinions, not what so-and-so said, but what actually happened. What were the facts, what were the figures, what were the times, what were the quantities, all of this sort of stuff that comes into it. So you get to the core of it fairly quickly. Once they tell you all of that, so they kind of vent that on you, that's fine, you then ask them what their intentions were. And at that point in time, most people will actually be quite honest with you and say, look, my intention was to get this done as quick as possible. And maybe that's part of it, trying to rush it through meant that the quality hasn't actually sort of survived. So, asking them what their intentions are can tell you kind of if there's any undercurrents to it. Once they've got that out, the intention side of things is where you obviously listen to them. So consequently, at this stage, the trust level goes up because you're listening, etc. And then what you can do is you can ask them, okay, so what do you need to do to sort it out? What do you need to do to put it right? That key component relies upon the fact that most people have got a pretty good idea what they need to do, but because it went wrong the first time, their confidence has dipped, so they want to run it past you. So the model is quite useful for stopping you from actually taking the burden on of sorting it out. It puts the rectification back where it belongs. So that's the model. Is there any questions that you have or about the application in your line of work? Of where you can actually use it?
I guess that's quite useful when a negotiation maybe break down
Right. Okay.
between your client and a candidate.
Right. Okay.
Why the why
Yeah.
negotiations are broken down.
So you would be in a kind of like investigative role? Is that as to why it happened?
Well,
it sounds a bit stern, doesn't it? Investigative role, but
no, but I think if the client comes to you and says, well, there's an issue with that individual candidate, the meeting didn't go well, you want to try and understand what actually happened and why the meeting didn't go well, and if the client wants to continue with the conversations with the candidate, you need to find out if the candidate's still interested or if they've been put off for whatever reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's quite a little robust framework to actually, sort of almost logically marshal them through the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite useful to have some points to work out exactly, as you say, what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. Okay, the second model we want to look at is this one here, which is what's negative, interesting and positive. So the previous model that we actually looked at basically looks at sorting something out if it went wrong. This is about learning from the mistake. So in this particular case, it might be working with the candidate so as they realise the error of their ways or whatever if it didn't materialise. And typically what we do, certainly in management now, what they tend to do is they're trying to actually give you a bit of good news, if you like, and give you the good news at the end, and then sort of sandwich the bad news in the middle. Now that typically has one or two problems with it, because if you say to somebody, I've got some feedback for you, they usually are expecting the worst. And if you've got some bad news to deliver, it's usually playing on your mind about what the reaction will be to that bad news. So the good news that's delivered very often, even in both parties' minds, is overshadowed by the fact that you've got some bad news coming anyway. So this model actually cuts through that kind of sugarcoating, and also I think it's more authentic in terms of this. The first thing, as it says on the top of the wee card here, first thing is, what is it you're trying to achieve? So you would ask that, despite the fact that the candidate actually went for the job, etc. You say, look, what exactly were you trying to achieve when you went for this job? And just get them to talk it through, you know, so, well, I really think that I could have actually got this job, etc. So they'll talk through what it is that they want to do, and so on and so forth. What you then do is you say, right, okay, I'm just going to tell you one thing, where based on what you said you're trying to achieve, and based upon either what I heard or what I saw, this is in a management field, you would do that, but on the feedback that I've got, one thing where I think you're kind of going against what you're trying to achieve. So it's negative in light of what you're trying to achieve. And then you just tell them what's negative, just the one thing. And as soon as you've done that, you don't give them an opportunity to actually come back and say, well, what do you mean by that or whatever. You just give them the one thing, and you literally drive the conversation on to say, okay, of the whole process that you've just gone through, what was interesting, what sticks in your mind, and what was most memorable. And what will happen is that the person will start talking about that particular aspect of it. And when they start talking about it, they talk themselves away from the negative aspect of it. Because in the earlier model, like I said, we've got the good news and the bad news in the middle and the good news at the end. What happens is that you get into the bad news and you have actually got to get them up to the good news again. You've got to motivate them to come out of it. And it doesn't usually work. Whereas in this particular model, it's the candidate themselves that talks themselves away from the negativity. And once you allow them to actually talk that through, what was interesting to them, you can then finish up by giving them a piece of good news, you know, what was positive, because you know what they were trying to achieve. So it gives a slightly different structure to the one that we typically have actually come across. And it tends to get a lot more mileage as well. You know, we get emails and everything coming back from people saying, was a bit sceptical about this to start with, because it looks like you're starting with a negative. However, the results that we've actually found is that it makes a real difference. People take on board the learning. So that's why this one here is about learning from your mistakes. So, and I don't know, is that one that can actually...
No, that's quite useful. It's useful in not just dealing with a candidate, but also in dealing with, you know, in every aspect of business, I think, not just...
It works well, you know, from any age. We've used it in schools and everything, and it's quite good to get people used to a different kind of model as well.
Yeah, no, very helpful.
Okay. You comfortable with where you are so far?
Yes, fine.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.